volver a comenzar. Esta es una de las cosas ricas de volver a comenzar el año, que decimos, estamos comenzando nuevamente con las cosas buenas. Y vamos a comenzar este año con nuestro fundador, con Bob Dunham. Algunos de ustedes lo conocen, algunos de ustedes seguramente no lo conocen. Que los quiero presentar. Bob Dunham es el fundador del Instituto de Liderazgo Generativo. Lleva más de 40 años pensando, diseñando, gestionando y evolucionando en la narrativa del liderazgo generativo. Esta es una narrativa, es una disciplina para nosotros, porque más que una narrativa, es una disciplina que nos llena de prácticas para poder ver, entender, aprender y practicar el liderazgo de una manera profesional. Y nos permite sobre todo estar siempre centrados en los resultados. ¿Qué es esto que yo hago que necesito poner en resultados? ¿Qué es lo que yo siento que necesito hacer para poner en resultados? O sea, siempre estamos buscando espacios de resultados y de logros que nos generan satisfacción. Y el tema de hoy es precisamente sobre eso. Antes de que empecemos con el tema, quiero contarles que nuestra sesión de hoy es una sesión traducida simultáneamente. Bea nos va a ayudar con la traducción. Y aquí les quiero dar como primero la indicación de cómo acceder a la traducción. En la parte de abajo del menú de la pantalla de Zoom van a encontrar un botón que está al lado de los emoticones y de las caritas, que se llama interpretación. Cuando ustedes dan clic en ese botón, tienen la posibilidad de elegir en inglés, si quieren oír a Bob en inglés, o a Bob y a Bea en inglés cuando estemos hablando en español, y en español si quieren escuchar la traducción todo el tiempo en español. Como esto es una conversación, más que una presentación o más que un espacio académico, les voy a pedir dos cosas. La primera es que prendan sus cámaras, que estén aquí con nosotros, que conversemos, que nos miremos. Bob siempre nos ha dicho, y a mí me encanta, que aparecer es una de las primeras reglas del liderazgo, ¿no? Estar aquí, estar presente. Ya llevamos 2 o 3 años de pandemia, ya ni sé cuántos son y no quiero saber, pero sabemos que se atraviesan los gatos, se atraviesan los perros, los hijos vienen a saludar, algunos están comiendo, así que todo eso está bienvenido. Así que prendan sus cámaras, que queremos verlos y queremos pues estar con ustedes. Y lo segundo, con respecto a la traducción, gracias por prender las cámaras, gracias Loida, gracias Víctor, es que ustedes van a tener la posibilidad de también hablar, de conversar, porque como les decía, es un conversatorio más que un espacio solamente de escuchar a Bob. Así que pueden hablar en inglés o pueden hablar en español. Bea nos va a ayudar a poder traducir en el idioma que ustedes hablen. Lo que les voy a pedir es que no hablen tan rápido como yo, sino que hablen un poquito más despacio para darle tiempo a Bea de que nos ayude con la traducción. Entonces, bueno, hoy, como les contaba, tenemos a Bob con un tema que es súper importante para nosotros en el liderazgo, sobre todo en el liderazgo generativo, y es una de las prácticas más importantes y una de las competencias más importantes que debe tener un líder, y es cómo me hago cargo del quiebre, cómo me hago cargo de una crisis, cómo manejo, cómo gestiono, cómo puedo lograr en medio de la crisis, de la dificultad, del momento sombrío, seguir generando resultados. Y la razón por la que traemos esta conversación es porque hemos visto que muchas todos los países de Latinoamérica, en Estados Unidos, en muchas partes del mundo, estamos hablando de la recesión, de la dificultad del dólar, de la guerra, de cómo la guerra en Europa y en Asia está afectando, y en Rusia está afectando lo que está pasando en Latinoamérica, porque todos vivimos en el mismo mundo, pero lo que está pasando en, no sé, los despidos masivos en el Silicon Valley está afectando también el dólar. Entonces, ¿qué es eso de poder prosperar en la recesión, en la crisis? ¿Quién soy durante la crisis? Porque la pregunta más importante que yo me hago es que durante la crisis, de todas maneras, hay gente que está prosperando. Entonces, ¿qué tienen esas personas que prosperan? ¿Qué tienen esas personas que sí están logrando generar resultados y logros que yo no estoy haciendo? O que las personas que no están prosperando están haciendo. Entonces, esa es la conversación que vamos a traer hoy con Bob, donde él nos va a abrir estas posibilidades de conversación, y que definitivamente es parte de las conversaciones que construimos en la comunidad de líderes y de coaches y de consultores generativos, y que son parte del trabajo que hacemos en nuestro programa de coaching y consultoría generativa. Para aquellos que quieran que estén interesados, Gloria nos va a dejar los links del programa. Estamos en este momento en inscripciones. Tenemos un buen precio de descuento para las personas que se inscriban en enero y febrero. Así que ahí les vamos a dejar el link. Pero entonces, no más introducciones, los dejo con Bob y conversemos. ¿Qué es eso que soy yo? ¿Quién soy yo frente a un momento de crisis? Bob, todos tuyos.
Fantastic. So let me begin by inviting you. Give me a high 10. Let's connect. Let's say hello to each other. And I'm going to follow on the theme of the camera because I invite you to take this conversation tonight as a place to practice leadership, not to just listen about it. And can you imagine a leader who only shows up with no face, only a voice? So practice being present. And I know you may have situations that you need your camera off, but if you're here to engage, then let's engage. And so the high 10 was an attempt to connect. You may have just waved your fingers at me. I want you to lean forward and connect with people here. Look them in the eye. Leadership is a human activity, person to person. We need to, first of all, enter there, not just be in our head and contracted, because contraction is one of the enemies, not just of leadership, but of life. We see the world, we see breakdowns, and contraction is one way that our body can try to keep us safe. But in the world of leadership, the contracted leader is taking the future for their team, for their organization, down. Contraction is one response to crisis. Now, you may have heard before that in Chinese, the word for crisis has two characters. The first character says danger. The second character says opportunity. And so, what is your basic orientation to crisis in the world? Not only the big world, but in your world, the world of your market or your organization or your industry or your clientele. And one of the principles of generative leadership that we have learned with over 40 years of practice is that when there is a challenge, a breakdown, a triggering moment in the future, in the situation, the job of the leader is to stay present and hold the center. What does it mean to hold the center? It is to hold possibility, to hold the source of action, to not simply react to the situation, but to embrace it for creating it. So I'm going to have you do, some of you who have been with me before maybe have passed this test already, this very important, difficult leadership test that I have people do. It's called take a deep breath. Can you take a deep breath? Literally do it. Don't just listen. Do it. I want you to feel your body. Why am I doing this as a leadership practice? Because one of the biggest enemies for leadership and for living life in the face of challenge is that we get tense. We contract. We lose our power in the situation. And so what do we do with that? We take a deep breath and we relax the body on the exhale so that we can open to be present to the moment. So let's take a deep breath again, this time to relax on the exhale and come open. And it's also in letting go of the tension. You let go of the chatter in your head. Oh, I don't like it. This is weird. This is one way that we get distracted from bringing our power to the moment. Does this make sense? So simple, not trivial, crucial. So I'll be asking you to take a deep breath on occasion when we want to stop and open and be present to the moment. So what are the ways that we and our clients, when we go into consulting, can react to crisis? They can contract. They can be afraid. They can go into waiting. Oh, I'll wait till things get better. They can hang on to the old identity. Oh, this is what I do, and the market's down, so I'll wait until the market comes back so I can do what I used to do. But you see, every one of these actions, every one of these reactions disconnects from the future. It only reacts to a negative opinion of the moment. When Maribel said there are people who thrive in crisis, how would you thrive in crisis? How would a consultant thrive in crisis? So one of the things I asked Maribel, and she told me just earlier this week, I said, how are our graduates doing? How are they doing in this difficult market? And Maribel, why don't you tell them? I think they're all doing very well. Yeah. And so that comes from a relationship with the future that is fundamental to what we have learned and what we have made our contribution in the world to teach and support people is the future is created. It is always created. And many people don't know that. Many people live in the story, and your clients live in the story, that the future looks like the past. And if things are bad now, the past is not working, and they don't know how to create the future. We need to learn how to create the future. And what do we want to do when we create the future? We want to create a good one. We want to create value. But we need to know how to create value that may not be the old value. It may need to be a new value for a new world, for new concerns and new standards. I learned my early lessons in this capacity to create in the middle of a crisis happened for me way, way back. You see, I have white hair, so I've been around for a while. And there was an oil crisis back in the 60s. and 70s and 80s, we had economic crisis. And in the US, the mortgage rates for houses went up to 18, 20, 20%, which means you couldn't buy a house unless you were crazy. And I remember having a family party, and I had a cousin who was a sales manager, and I said, oh, the economy is so bad. They raised the interest rates and things are bad. You must have sales, your sales must be down. And he looked at me and he said, no, my sales are not down. I said, what? This is not the story of the economy that you're telling me. He said, well, sales were going down, and I checked on my salespeople, and what I learned was they weren't doing their sales practices. They were infected by the story that the market was bad, and so they weren't selling. And I fixed that. We changed the story. They're doing their job. They're taking action in the world, and our sales are fine. So what is the danger of the contraction reaction? Is to lose your capacity for action. So where are you right now in your story? Facing the crisis of the world, the recessions, the markets changing, the politics are uncertain. And the generative posture that we're going to explore tonight, not simply as a conversation, but that I invite you to take back into your life, is I can create in that world. Because just like my cousin saying, if you're in the practices of sales, you can sell in a bad market. Why? You create value. You find customers who need what you have to sell. I also got married at that time, and I wanted to buy a house. And I said, I can't, this would be crazy to try to get a mortgage at 18%. And so did I contract? Did I wait? No, I looked around and I found that there are mortgages that are assumable mortgages. So I wound up finding a house where I could assume the mortgage that the owner already had that was at a very reasonable rate. Possibility, looking for possibility. And in my professional work, I was in a company that was contracting. Some of you may have heard me tell that story. This is my Silicon Valley story. I had a company that was in a death spiral in Silicon Valley. How do you get in a death spiral in Silicon Valley? Be in technology and don't produce a new product. Technology moves fast. You have to constantly update and innovate. My company was not doing that. And they brought in a new vice president to deal with the situation. He asked me to help him and put me in charge of 250 software engineers, 22 managers, and 35 products. And I'd never done it before. But what did I already know? That our results come from our action. We need to change our actions. And so I was not in the mood that these were the people that failed. I was in the mood, these are the people who can create the new future. And we did that. We created new conversations, and in 6 months, we delivered all 35 products of the company on time, on budget, 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before, and sales began to go back up. So these are examples. These are examples of facing crisis. And so I want to share with you some of the learning we've done of how to think about these situations and how to deal with them. One of the powerful perspectives that we've learned about dealing with change and crisis comes from biology. I learned this originally from Dr. Umberto Maturana. And he pointed out that every living thing survives only because they do two things. Everything that survives as a living thing, including organizations, teams, leaders, and managers. They have to do two things. The first thing they have to do is conserve. They have to maintain the essential fundamentals for survival. They have to maintain their body temperature. They have to maintain their hydration level. They have to maintain their oxygen. They have to make whatever the living thing does, it has to maintain and conserve. And so if it's in a bad situation, it moves to maintain its survival. And what is the moving? The moving is the other side of what life requires of us, is to adapt. You conserve and you adapt. And this applies to any living organism and any group of people. Companies that are too conservative, avoiding change, will eventually die. Companies that adapt by taking too big a risks and forget to conserve what's essential go out of business because they take too big a risk. This is part of our consulting framework. Where is our client being too conservative and not adapting? And where are their adaptations perhaps being unwise? Our experience, by the way, in the marketplace is the companies tend to have the problem of being too conservative. And they wind up missing the opportunities and sometimes don't survive if they don't do that. So take a deep breath. I'm sharing with you, not ideas, I'm sharing with you perspectives. And so when I use these distinctions of conservation and adaptation, let me start with you. What is it that you are conserving in your stories about your leadership, your career, your offer in the world? One way that conservation shows up is in the story of your identity. You say, I am this. I am an accountant. I am a coach. And another story is our personality. I am shy. I am cautious. Or I'm wild and crazy. Those are stories of conservation. But what if your story about your identity was, I am the author of my identity and I create it. And I allow it to adapt through learning and experimentation to take care of what I care about and what my clients care about. That's a different story. That's going from being trapped in an old story to moving to adaptation, which we can do with prudence. So let me share another perspective that we found super important for consulting and leadership in organizations. There are three dimensions of leadership that are also three kinds of conversations. And the reason I'm mentioning conversations is because the principle we have discovered in our over 40 years of working with leaders and organizations and coaches of leaders is that all action and all results come from conversations. And this is the shock to some people. It was to me when I first learned it. I said, oh, I thought all the results came from action. Yes, I do. But all the actions are defined in prior conversations. Conversations of agreements, conversations of what we need to do, what is our standards, what is valuable. And some of the conversations happened a long time ago and became part of our context. And then we wind up being blind to the limits of our thinking. So sometimes there's a conversation about the world. How does this show up in organizations? Well, you got to get these numbers. Almost every organization we go into, and particularly the large ones, say, here's your numbers. Go for the numbers. And that's a world conversation. It's good to have objectives. It's good to have targets. It's good to have results in the world. But simply saying that doesn't produce it. Simply telling people to produce results is not enough. This is actually a style of ineffective leadership, when the only conversation they have is about the results in the world. Why? Because in order to produce those results in the world, we have to come together. Our organization has to coordinate. Our organization has to perform. Our organization has to create value. And so we're now in the domain of action, not simply world activities and results. And when we look here at what we call the we space, there's something very obvious and powerful that is ignored in the common sense, is that all the action comes from people. All the action is performed by people. And what actions they perform and how they perform it, to what standard, and whether or not it is valuable, is a conversation. So there is a we conversation. This is the space of leadership, is creating the shared conversations of coordination that has people take action, that creates results, which are creating the future. It happens in conversation. But what have we found? What have we found in the Institute for Generative Leadership? Is that when we talk about results in the world and we begin to say, what are the conversations of the team? We find that everyone has to deal with themselves. They have to deal with what they know and don't know, what skills they have and don't have in these conversations. Leadership starts with me. It starts with unavoidable required skills. Do you listen to people or not? And does your client listen or not? Do you connect or not? Because disconnection produces distrust and lack of ownership, lack of a shared future. When there's a crisis, what do you do? Do we go to the waiting, the contraction, the complaining? These are not effective ways to create the future. And so in our 40 years of study, we have seen what leaders need to do in times of crisis. And they have to produce a certain ability to engage with people and become present in a way that they produce trust, ambition, possibility, commitment, and readiness for action. That's what we need to do in a crisis. And if our reactions get in the way, then we're an ineffective leader. And so this is the way that we have learned in our 40 years of working with leadership development, that people need to understand that results in life and results in the world require the skill of being able to see and act effectively with others to produce action for the results, and that you have to meet the requirements of leadership in your own body, in your own emotional repertoire. The product of leaders is the actions of others. And these actions are not simply mechanical. When leaders view the actions of others as simply activities to be directed, they mechanize the culture. They leave out inspiration, ownership, trust, possibility, and these organizations don't produce innovation. They don't produce ownership, and they tend to struggle. They survive because the history of the company was to find a product that was popular and to produce a process that repeats the production of the product. And people don't need to do much creativity. And that's an organization that needs help in the crisis. And that's where, as consultants and as coaches and as leaders, we can make offers when an organization is in breakdown or crisis, or a leader is finding themselves in that state inside their organization. How are we doing? Hello? Hello, hello. No, come on. I want to see some, yeah, okay. I don't want to tranquilize you with the story. I want you to be engaged with it. And the question I have for you is, as a leader, as a consultant, as a coach, do you have clarity on the different conversations of world, we, teams, organization, and the skills that are required? When we learn in generative leadership, we learned to bring two important conversations to our clients. One is to create value. And so we need to understand what value is. Value is not simply a characteristic of a product. It's not a price. If a yacht was selling for $25 million and I had $25 million, the value of that yacht to me would be zero, because I don't want to spend my money on yachts. The value of the yacht is in the customer, not in the yacht. And so when we deal with value creation, we need to understand, what does the customer value and what do the internal customers value? And are they valuing the right things? And so sometimes what we find is the way the organization is functioning is too conservative. It's repeating the past. It's not creating the future. There's a beautiful phrase about the future that was written in a book by a couple of management gurus in the US. And they talked about the future is created. The people that create the future are referred to as innovators. And they said, you have a choice as a company, as a team, as a leader. You either are an innovator that's leading, or if you're on the highway to the future, you're driving the car. And if you're not driving the car, then you're a passenger in the car, if you're lucky. And if you're not a passenger in the car, you're roadkill. You're going to get run over by those people who are creating and changing the future. So in generative leadership, we're looking to help our clients deal with these factors that I mentioned at the beginning. One of the things we need to be able to do to support our clients is if their reaction to change and crisis is contraction and fear, we need to give them a new relationship to contraction and fear. Fear should never be deciding what we do. It should be an advisor to what we do. And when we have a reaction, we have learned that the full body capacity to stay present in the moment of challenge and to enter for action, for effective action, requires a skill that we call being centered. And so if the crisis grabs you like this, what's your reaction? Ah! Could be the reaction. And if you want to do the exercise to feel about what your reaction is, go ahead and grab your wrist. Go ahead and do it. Do it with me. Now notice, here you are. The world has grabbed you. The situation has grabbed you. But what your experience of it is the trigger. The world is only the trigger. What you do is a choice. Now you can fight, or you can relax and figure out your strategy, direct your energy, and you will have more ability to move with the world rather than fighting the world. Can you feel the difference? This is called centering and entering. And this is part of what generative leadership includes, because we discovered very early, 40 years ago, when trying to teach leadership conversations and principles, that having the concept of the right conversation didn't mean that people could do it. Having the concept of what action to take didn't mean that their body was capable of avoiding the reaction. And so we have to go through a phase in what we call embodied learning, because leadership is a performance art. It is a full body contact sport. It is not a domain of scholarship and concepts and models. And that's the problem with a lot of leadership development out there in the world. It's taught as models and ideas and good things to do, but you have to have the body that can do it. And so how do you learn? How do you learn to do something new? I'll give you an example. One of the breakdowns we find our leaders in, and everything that we coach and consult in leadership is something that we don't just know about and talk about. We learn it in our own lives. So when we find leaders and organizations that are in a state of overwhelm and often exhaustion, one of the things we find is they are overcommitted. And we ask a question: how did you get overcommitted? Who did that to you? Have any of you ever experienced overcommitment? Anxiety, too much to do, can't get it all done? Who did that to you? The answer is you did. You agreed to do more than you could do. So that takes us to a crucial leadership skill of assessing my capacity and negotiating my actions and my results based on my capacity. Many people are afraid to do this, and many organizations saying no is not allowed. And so we wind up being overwhelmed. It does not produce quality. And so in our consulting, when we find overwhelm, we teach people you need to say no and call a timeout and improve your strategy for success. Because working harder at what's not working is usually not a very good strategy. It is the most primitive strategy there is. How many of you are trapped in the do more strategy? It'll finally all work out if I just do more. I'll give up my weekend. Oh, I'll work evenings. Damn, it doesn't seem to get better. One of the reasons is if you're a successful leader, or if you do more, people will ask more of you. The market will ask more of you. And the problem with the work hard, do more strategy is we never stop and think about designing a more valuable future. We're too tired. We're too busy. Your calendar's full. That's an example of some of the traps that our clients get lost in, and we need to help them see that and call a timeout and stop and create a more effective strategy for value creation in the future. Maribel.
Bob, es que me encanta lo que nos estás trayendo, porque no sé si para todos es evidente, pero quiero hacerlo evidente para todos, que muchas veces en las organizaciones, como líderes o como seres humanos, tratamos de solucionar la crisis a nivel mental, ahí lo estaba poniendo en el chat, cuando la crisis la estamos sintiendo es de manera corporal y emocional. Entonces, mientras no, realmente me encanta lo que traes acerca del centro, de respirar, de entender la contracción que tengo corporalmente, somáticamente, porque de otra manera mi mente no se va a abrir, ¿no? Si yo sigo mirando la crisis mentalmente, pero no hago nada con relajarme y poder entrar a ver posibilidades, mi cabeza no va a solucionar la crisis. Y creo que es una de las cosas más importantes que traes acerca de respirar, centrarme, manejar mi energía, porque de esa manera puedo empezar a ver posibilidades. Mientras tanto, mi mente, mi cuerpo, mi emoción está cerrada y desde ahí no voy a poder entrar a un mundo posible.
Beautiful. One of the blind spots, because most of the leadership breakdowns we have discovered over the years are blind spots. Not the incompetence of leaders, but cultural blind spots. We have found that the common sense of our culture does not understand what action is, does not understand what learning is, does not understand what choice is. For example, with choice, there was a time in my life where I would have body reactions, and I said, well, that's me. That's my body. That's like, I can't do anything with my body reactions. And then when I was exploring learning and leadership, there are many disciplines that teach you how to manage your body reactions and create choice in the moment of crisis. Martial arts is one of them. Sports, and that's where this language of center and choose, centering is choosing. So for ourselves and for our clients, we reveal that body reactions don't decide for us. What we need to learn is I have a body reaction, but I don't let it make a decision for me. Then I find my center, I find my choice, and I move from my commitment, not my reaction. Emotions are the same. There was a time in my life where emotions would happen to me, and I'd say, that's just what happens, you know, there's nothing I can do, they come. And we found the notion of centering works with emotions as well. They do come. I do feel angry or sad or irritated or afraid or overwhelmed. But when we center, we choose where we're going to move from, and the emotion changes. It's connected to the body, and these are both shaped by the stories we have about the way life is, the way the world is, the way I am, and what is action. These are the foundations of leadership skill. And they're not only crucial for ourselves to find choice about not my body reaction. My body reaction is not going to decide for me. My fear is not going to decide for me. My story is not going to decide for me. I need to go to someplace deeper. What do I really care about? What am I really committed to? And bring my commitment to the situation. This description I'm doing is something that is the foundation of our understanding of the embodiment of leadership. And we practice. And the practices that we engage in are for a lifetime. You don't learn leadership through concepts. You have to learn leadership as skills and practice. It's the same as learning the piano. Can you learn to play the piano through concepts? No, you have to play the piano. Can you learn tennis because you understand the concepts? No, you have to get in the tennis court. And that is what we mean by leadership being a performance art, a full body skill. Every one of you has some of these skills, but we also are coming from cultural blindness of what leadership is, what action is, and what learning is. And so one of our discoveries is that learning is not understanding. Learning is not academic school. Learning is embodying new actions and practices that produce new results. If you have a lot of concepts and don't produce any new results, we would say the only thing you've learned is a lot of concepts, but not leadership, not professional skill, and not even life skill. And so let me go back to share here. I want to, hang on. So what is it? What do we have to learn to be an effective leader, coach of leaders, consultant to leaders? When contraction and fear shows up, it's in the me space. It's in my body. It's in my story. It's in my, we don't let that dominate me. It's a place of learning. We learn to recenter into the center of a leader, which is, this is what I care for, this is what I'm committed to, and I'm going to take a stand for the future, for myself and those I serve. When we hang on to our old story and we don't have a new conversation, we don't have a new offer to make in the world, that's in the we space. We've been trapped in the past and we haven't created new value and a new offer. This is perhaps the center of the bullseye of what we're learning in generative leadership, is when the world changes, we learn to create the value that world needs, and we do it and customize for every client that we consult with. And when the world changes, we don't wait for the world to come back. I don't think the world is ever going to go back to the way it was. The world, the way it is now, is the new world. The normal, I would propose, the most powerful way to look for a situation that's normal is make today normal and learn to adapt to create value to today. These are the conceptual frameworks. And what do we do to practice these? We learn to be aware, to see with new eyes. We learn new conversations. Because what does a leader do? They have conversations. And they have conversations where they can treat people as machines and create cultures in which people do not thrive, or they can treat people as their colleagues in creating the future, who deserve to have a voice, to be listened to have conversations where we create shared care and shared commitment and shared standards and shared practices, because we're doing this together. And those are the organizations that thrive. That's what generative leadership teaches us to do. And we don't do it through sacrifice of being the hard worker that's taking on the problems and doing more. We do this with an ethic that if we really are effective leaders creating the future with others, we should create good futures, not only for them, but for ourselves. We don't sacrifice our life. We design a good life for ourselves and a good life for our clients. And that's a standard that helps us prevent leadership being a demand for sacrifice all the way to people's health, people's family life, and their well-being. And so that's the spirit of generative leadership. That is the skill of facing a crisis, is to be ready for whatever shows up. What is the feeling for being ready for whatever shows up? It's to embrace the situation, including the breakdowns. Go ahead and open your arms. I want you to feel being open and being willing to bring in all the things that may be what trigger us to fear, that we would love to push it away. We would love to run away. The leader brings it in. The leader learns to center and walk into the fire without being burned. And the way we learn to coach and consult to our clients is we learn to do that in our own lives. And that's what we mean by leadership being a performance art, not simply some good ideas or an assessment tool that we take into companies and use. It's fine to have assessment tools, but that's not what the leadership game is about. The leadership game is facing the world, seeing what's missing, coming up with a way to create value and to reduce or eliminate negative value that's called waste. We can waste time, we can waste money, we can waste trust, we can waste the future with our paralysis. And that's where we help our clients create a more valuable future, more effective teams, more effective conversations. And we learn by doing it ourselves. And we do it through practice and action, not only in your own learning path, but we also have learning teams that do projects where everything that is learned is put to work. And our every learning team does a project for real results with a real client. So you're actually putting all these principles to work with yourself, with your colleagues, producing real results for the sake of learning to create value and make new offers and build your own body to have the confidence that I can walk into any company, deal with any team, and help them see what's missing, what's possible, what needs to be let go of, and what needs to be learned. Then you create the future. You don't wait for the world to give you one. So, Mary Bell, anything that you want to add to that? And we'll open up for comments and questions.
Yo quisiera oírlos. Estaba poniendo también un comentario que es algo que hemos estado siempre hablando con Bob en nuestras conversaciones, y él lo traía ahorita en la conversación y quiero enfatizar en él, y es ser líder significa enfrentar el riesgo. Para crear valor yo necesito escuchar y enfrentar el riesgo. Así que una parte fundamental de enfrentarnos a la crisis es saber en qué estado de ánimo estamos. Y saber que el riesgo se debe, como decía Bob, mirar, afrontar, traerlo y poder enfrentarnos a él. Así que nada, no quiero ocupar el tiempo porque quiero oírlos a ustedes.
So let's open up for questions that I've provoked, comments. Hopefully you're getting a sense of we're creating a new story of what leadership is that allows us to make leadership a domain of action and results with real people. Sandra.
Thank you, Bob. ¿Puedo hacer la pregunta en inglés?
En el idioma, bueno, no en el idioma que quieras, en inglés o en español.
Bueno, en inglés entonces. Thank you, Bob. Really, really thought-provoking. I wanted to ask you how to deal with uncertainty. So when you're at that point, and this happened to me, that the company announced there's going to be a huge restructuring, pretty much merging two units into one, but we don't have any more details, and this went on for months. And for example, well, it was hard for me to deal with, but also with my team. So I had two people reporting to me, and I also didn't have the answers. We didn't know what the company was going to transform into, and even we were going to want to still be there. So that's one, how to deal in that point where you don't see maybe the light at the end of the tunnel. And if it's okay for leaders to show vulnerability, because from what I heard, I was thinking that might not be very reassuring, of course, for your reports, and might make them contract even more if they see their leader in fear or with uncertainty about the future. Thank you.
Yeah. So uncertainty, first of all, certainty is an assessment. And it's an assessment. I'm certain what's going to happen because I have promises in the past. But, every day we go out to the world. Maybe you go to work. You don't know if you're going to come home. So where's the certainty? The certainty is that there's a certain pattern and rhythm going on that we count on. But why am I making this point about uncertainty as an assessment? Is because one of the key responsibilities of leadership is to deal with uncertainty. And so when we're dealing with a stable situation where there's not a story of uncertainty, we can become tranquilized and we just work hard in the routines that are going on. So part of the conversational skill is to say, well, what if the market changed? What if we had a layoff tomorrow? What if, and not to be afraid of these conversations, but they are our responsibility because they're part of what the future might bring. So that's the first principle here is the mood of responsibility for whatever comes, rather than I'll be a good leader as long as there's no trouble or uncertainty. The second comment I'll offer around uncertainty is, and I learned this in my Silicon Valley days because we had similar situations where the organization had not announced things and people were leaving and not knowing what's going to happen. And I learned the following principle. You can create certainty in the uncertainty. What is the uncertainty? Something may happen. We don't know what it is. But guess what? You can probably figure out the 2 or 3 scenarios that are likely to happen. And what's of immediate concern for employees, for example, is, am I going to get laid off? And what does the leader do when we're facing that kind of uncertainty? What I believe adds to the uncertainty is to avoid it, to not have a conversation about it, And so the first thing we do is we talk about it. What do we talk about? It could be this and it could be that. What are we going to do if it's going to be this? What are we going to do if it's going to be that? And that's a way to say, how do you bring uncertainty to that? As a leader, you say, here's my commitment. Here's what I'm going to do. If you want to go with me, then I'm taking this strategy. And given the uncertainty, that may be intolerable for you. You may need to leave or do something else. And I support you because we're all facing it. But this is when you're showing the future is created. It's not just handed to us. Like the world is going to do what it does. But what we have to remember, what we do when the world does what it does is our choice. We are in a dance with the world. We are always 50% of our experience. We are always choosing what we're going to do in the world. And so when we look at that, we say, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to stand for? And I had an organization in Silicon Valley where there was new technology and people wanted to know, should I go work on the new technology or the old technology? And we were having layoffs. And I had to decide what conversation was I going to have with my organization. I had 250 engineers. And I told them, these are the questions. I don't know the answers, but this is my commitment. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to go forward. That'll be what this organization is doing unless something outside our control happens. And if you stay, I will support you. And if you want to do something else, I will support you. But you see, that's taking a stand. That's creating certainty in the uncertainty of how to deal with the uncertainty. And this might, Maribel, this might be a place to show Knaven. Yeah? So Sandra, your question is so good. I'll get to your other one on vulnerability later. But there is a framework that we've also learned that is very powerful for dealing with uncertainty. So let's share that with you. And
Bob, let me tell you something. Patricia, nos acabas de hacer una pregunta en el chat también, donde hablas acerca de cuál es la mejor recomendación al ver un líder que tiene incertidumbre o una crisis personal que se está viendo reflejada en su equipo de trabajo y en sus resultados. Lo que Bob va a mostrar ahorita te puede ayudar también con eso. Bueno, y si no, le volvemos a preguntar al final. Sí.
So this is a framework of different levels of uncertainty. And each category has certain strategies that are effective for a leader. So this category is what is known, what is understood, what is familiar. This is the place that we like to live. Everything's stable. I know what's coming. I am certain. This is the certainty category. And Maribel, can you put in the Spanish here? Beautiful. Thank you. And so this is where we like to be when we're in uncertainty. But there are also problems. There are also challenges. Where the market has changed, the technology has changed, the organization has changed. And it's not that we have seen this before and we know what to do, but we know we have design principles that will deal with the problem, that will do some design and we'll figure it out and we'll have. So here it's not just, I already know it and we know what to do. We need to do a project. We need to have a design. And that still has the confidence. This is where consultants are often brought in. We have a problem. We know there's ways to do this problem. Can you help us with the problem? But then there is the category called complex.
Bob, perdón, déjame hacer una una moción de orden aquí. Cuando Bob abrió la página en blanco, aquí había ya una palabra que decía no conocible, pero no, es en la parte de abajo es lo conocido, en la parte de aquí arriba knowable es lo conocible, que es lo que nos estaba explicando, pero es que aquí hay un no que no he podido borrar, así que les pido me disculpen. Sigue, Bob.
You can put it back in, Maribel. So if you go ahead and re-enter. So complex. So Sandra, this is where things have gotten so complicated that not only do we not know how things are going, it's not clear that anyone has the solution space. The market has changed and we're not sure what's going on there. The technology has effects that we don't understand. And this is a very challenging place for people to be when the world is changing. But complexity has a strategy that works. You do experiments. You put out probes. You see what's going on. You begin to take fundamental principles and say, where is the value? Where is the waste? What is the... And so complex situations are ones that have not that we know how to solve the problem, but we can figure out how to solve the problem. And that is a skill. And then we have the category of chaos. And chaos is a situation that's not only complex, we're not sure how to deal with it, but it's changing so fast that any solution we come up with is not going to survive because things are changing. And what do you do in the chaos situation? The strategy with chaos situation is you focus on areas that you do know and stay in the boundaries of what is known and don't take too many risks in the change. And so this is a place we found is very useful for uncertainty. But you see, it creates a certainty of how to deal with uncertainty in a very practical way. So that there is the leadership presence and commitment that deals with uncertainty, that we don't know what the future is going to bring, but we can take a stand. And there is actions we can take and we can learn. And so with that begins to show that uncertainty is a time for learning and design, not a time for anxiety and worry, and for laying out scenarios and giving yourself the assurance. How are we doing? Does that resonate?
Absolutely.
And then we have the vulnerability question. You see, the essence of leadership is not to be the expert who knows. The essence of leadership is not to be the Superman or Superwoman who has no fear and is going to be perfect and no problem. No, leaders are human beings. And so vulnerability is often misunderstood. For example, you said, what if I show my fear? Well, if I'm a leader and I have fear, I say, I have some fear, but this is what I'm going to do about it. This is the stand I'm taking because of my fear. That's the leadership part. Vulnerability does not mean incompetence, does not mean I don't know what to do. It simply means I have human reactions. But the stand of the leader is to say, I can experience the fear, I can understand the uncertainty, and this is what I'm going to do about it. That's the leadership move. And you become an example to people. Vulnerability rather than trying to pretend to be, many leaders burn out trying to be the the perfect expert and the one who knows. No. Be a human being. Have the reactions you have, but then have an example of what does a leader do with fear? What does a leader do with uncertainty? What does a leader do with anxiety? And people will trust that leader more because they see, they feel they're facing what we are facing, and they're showing a path. How are we doing?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, very good. You're facing the real situation. So I'm pleased we have the conversation, because you can go and have a different conversation in your company now. That's fantastic.
Definitely, I will.
Beautiful. Who
Bob,
else? Yeah, please.
Patricia López nos pregunta, ¿cuál es la mejor recomendación? Yo, Patricia, supongo que debes ser coach de algún líder, porque me imagino que estás preguntando es cómo trabajar con ese líder. Al ver que un líder tiene incertidumbre, crisis personal que se está viendo reflejada en su equipo de trabajo y en sus resultados.
Okay. That sounds like a all too common scenario of a leader who's taking on a situation, they're not sure what to do. They're triggered. This often happens when people are promoted to a new level and they've never been there before. And no one trained them. No one taught them what they need to know at the new level. And so they struggle. And then if they don't feel confident, then they react, and then they're more worried, and then they look even worse. And a leader that's having personal issues in life, that's maybe not common, but it happens. And so with the latter issue, good consulting, good coaching allows them to separate domains. And this requires the ability to center and choose. When I'm in the work conversation, I'm not going to be worrying about my personal breakdown. And if they can't, they can still take care of their responsibilities by asking for help, by delegating, or by even taking time off. They can act responsibly at work if they're having personal issues. And if they're capable, they can deal with it separate from the work. The personal issues may actually be a very powerful place for coaching, because when people have personal issues, just like getting promoted to a new level, there are often issues that you've never faced before. I'm happily married, I'm pleased to say, and it's my third marriage. I went through personal crisis as a leader, and I didn't know what to do with them. And I'm happily married now because I finally learned. I wish I had learned sooner. I wish someone had, I had the coaching available of how to think about something that I didn't know how to deal with. And that's part of the power of what we're offering, because generative leadership is not simply leadership technique. It's based on the foundation of what is the human being, what is life, what is it to deal with breakdowns in life, and deal with your body reactions, your emotions, your conversations. And the personal breakdowns are in the domain of leadership also, because they're with other people. Even if they're having a crisis of addiction or something, it's affecting other people. And so what leaders need in those situations is, what do I do? What is the winning strategy here? And one of the biggest problems they have is they will try to hide it or avoid it rather than get the help they need. And so when it's affecting the team, this is when the leader needs to make an honest self-assessment. Should I stay in my role if I'm doing a bad job with the team? Because my job as a leader is to lead the team, to be the center for the team, to be the example for the team. And it's not a point of shame to say I have a breakdown and need help. It's actually good leadership. Take a deep breath. I want you to get this again. One of the fantasies that was spoken in the question about vulnerability that Sandra spoke was we can't have breakdowns as a leader. But we have them. We're human beings. What is the leadership skill and the life skill with breakdowns? Getting help. In my Silicon Valley days, I had to teach my team when they had a breakdown, bring it up and get help. Then you're doing your job. Your job is not to be the perfect manager, is not to be the perfect expert. Your job is not to hide the problem. Your job is to get the promise taken care of and get help. So if you have a breakdown or you see one coming, get the help you need. That is your job. And people need to learn that not only in leadership, but in life. We have a culture that teaches us to be solo sufferers. You know, I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to bother anyone. I'm not going to reveal my pain. That's the opposite. We need to create a network of support, both in our personal life and in our professional life and in our team, because that's what makes things happen. That's why we have teams, is not to have to be the solo Superman or Superwoman. Maribel.
Bob, me gusta el ejemplo que traes acerca de que hay personas que están cambiando de rol y se sienten confundidas. Y yo le diría también a Patricia que hay otros momentos que hemos visto como coaches y como consultores de liderazgo generativo muchas veces con nuestros líderes, con nuestros coaches líderes, y es los momentos en que las personas ya han hecho mucho de lo que han venido haciendo en su vida y están buscando una nueva fase o de propósito o una nueva fase en su care. Creo que, espero, ahorita le pedimos a Bob que nos hable un poquito del care si tenemos tiempo, pero las personas creen que el liderazgo es una pregunta de sí o no. Es como, ¿soy líder o no soy líder? Y resulta que el liderazgo es todo un proceso de camino de transiciones. Bob en su concepto o en su diseño o en su anatomía del liderazgo, ha visto que los líderes pueden estar en 6 diferentes transiciones. Y esas transiciones pueden estar afectando, no solamente pueden estar afectándolo personalmente en cosas que estén pasando con su familia o que estén pasando en cosas con ellos mismos, sino que en su propia transición como líderes pueden ir queriendo ir a un nuevo nivel de liderazgo y no saben cómo hacerlo, no saben cómo definirlo y no saben de quién acompañarse. Y de hecho, entonces lo presentan como esta sensación de me siento bloqueado, estoy stuck, estoy bloqueado, ya no tiene sentido lo que estoy haciendo. Y eso también afecta al equipo, porque no tienen un líder que los esté guiando, no tienen un líder que esté poniendo nuevas conversaciones, sino que es un líder que necesita ver cuál es ese crecimiento, cuál es esa transición, cuál es ese espacio de nueva vida que tiene que crear. Y allí lo que puedes hacer es identificar con él si lo que necesita es un nuevo rol, si lo que necesita, por ejemplo, es tener un nuevo alcance en el rol que está diseñando, si quiere tener, por ejemplo, mayor profundidad en el rol que está haciendo, o si quiere corregir algunas cosas del rol que está haciendo también, o conectarlo nuevamente con su care, con eso que le importa cuidar, si la persona todavía está conectada con seguir cuidando lo que quiere seguir cuidando. Entonces, me encanta lo que Bob trae acerca de si la persona está en un rol nuevo, y algo le está pasando personalmente, y también acerca de, ¿todavía tiene sentido lo que estás haciendo o no? El liderazgo generativo esa es una de las cosas más bonitas que me gusta a mí y que nos gusta a los líderes generativos y a los estudiantes del liderazgo generativo, los practicantes del liderazgo generativo. Y es que todo lo que estás produciendo afuera viene de un estado interno. Si tu estado interno, si tu estado de ánimo interno, si tu conexión de sentido con lo que estás haciendo, no hay conexión, no vas a poder proyectarlo hacia afuera. Entonces, hay que encontrar ese espacio de care a través de, bueno, de hacer la conversación de qué.
Beautiful. Maribel has opened up the conversation about your superpowers. You have superpowers. You were born with them. And our culture hasn't taught us, so most people don't know they have the superpower and they don't use it very well. You have the power of choice and the power of action. But what is the secret sauce? There are two elements of the power of choice. One is you get clear about what you care about. If you don't know what you care about, then you don't know what's valuable. You don't know what to choose. You don't know where to go, and you have no purpose. It's a superpower to get clear on your care. And in our program, we find, because it's a missing conversation in our culture, that people take many months, sometimes years, to answer the question, but it's your GPS in life. Without knowing your care, you don't know where you're going and why you should choose. The second secret sauce of choice is commitment. When you know your care, commitment is where you say, I'm going to take care of this care. And many people don't know their care and they suffer. And many people have care, but they don't commit to take care of it. And they live in the story, I need to sacrifice. You know, I have a mortgage, I can't choose. And they lose their superpower of choice. And we learn how to cultivate that in the generative learning path. The second superpower is action. Action happens in shared commitment created in conversation. You create the future in conversation. Where is the future? It's only in your conversation. You want to change the future, change your conversation, but only if it changes your commitment. Conversation is a place where commitment gets expressed and shared with others, and that produces the secret sauce of coordination, and that produces results. Those are your superpowers, and as Maribel said, care and commitment is inside of me, and when we learn to connect with them, it takes us to the superpower of action outside of me to have the right conversation, to produce the right action, to produce the future that we care about in our career, in our offer, in our teamwork, in our family, because this is not leadership technique. This is the foundations of human life. And that's why our generative framework is so powerful. We're dealing with real life and the way human beings are, but we need to illuminate our blind spots, see this new territory, engage fully, and learn in the performance art of life and leadership. They go together. They're not separate. Too many people want to learn leadership like it's a technique you use at work and then you go home and forget it. No, they go together. If you don't know how to lead in a certain way, you don't know how to live. And if you're going to lead well, you need to know how to live well. They go together. That's the generative framework. And our promise in the program is we'll not only show you the world from these eyes, we'll show you how to embody the skills to be a creator of your future, to be a value creator, to go to be a consultant that can go to any situation and see what's missing and possible and create new offers, create new value. And that's different than being stuck in a career path of repeating your past and what you already know. We need to create the new future, not simply repeat the old future from the old past. So, Maribel?
Después de esa frase no hay nada más que decir, Bob. Me encanta, a mí personalmente como que me emociona, pero yo estaba escribiéndolo en el chat. Lo que yo siento de la crisis es que cuando los seres humanos nos dejamos tomar de la crisis, nos dejamos sentir en la crisis, no tenemos la posibilidad de prosperar con lo que nos importa cuidar, porque creemos que necesitamos contraer. Y mientras nuestro propósito y nuestro querer estén contraídos, nuestro estado de ánimo va a ser un estado de ánimo de resignación y de no puedo hacer lo que quiero hacer. Así que hay que liderarnos y es la manera de hacerlo. Quiero resaltar, tengo un minuto, no me demoro más de un minuto, resaltar 5 puntos que Bob dijo que son súper importantes, además de lo que estamos diciendo para concluir nuestra conversación de hoy. El primero, buscar la posibilidad. El segundo, balance entre conservar y adaptar. No me puedo quedar solo en la conservación, necesito moverme hacia la adaptación. ¿Necesita valentía? Sí, pero necesito tener un balance. Escuchar el mundo y en lo que el mundo está insatisfecho y lo que está pidiendo. Trabajar sobre eso. El siguiente es crear equipos, crear alianzas. Mirar quiénes están con nosotros, quiénes están en el mismo care con nosotros y empezar a hacer alianzas que nos permitan ir hacia otras partes. Y el último es liderarme a mí mismo. ¿Qué estoy haciendo yo? ¿Cómo me estoy sintiendo? ¿Qué me está pasando con mi care? ¿Cuáles son las acciones que estoy tomando? ¿Hacia dónde me estoy dirigiendo? Y quiero añadir uno último y es, no puedo solucionar con la mente lo que mi cuerpo siente. Si yo siento contracción en el cuerpo, si yo siento contracción en mi emoción, mi cabeza no va a ser capaz de solucionarlo. Necesito volver al centro, manejar mi respiración, entender, aperturarme, abrirme a la posibilidad para poder atender la crisis. Pero con un cuerpo contraído y un estado de ánimo resignado, no lo voy a lograr. Esas serían mis conclusiones más importantes. Y bueno, conectarte con tu propósito, conectarte con tu care. Porque si no, tampoco voy a ver la importancia de hacerme cargo de la crisis. Pedro, cerramos contigo.
30 segundos, Maribel y Bob. Muchas gracias. Y para mí este evento es la mejor forma de ver aplicado lo que nos están contando. Para mí esto es Bob, tú y el instituto mirando lo que está pasando, lo que necesitamos y trayendo valor para la comunidad. Así que muchísimas gracias.
Not hearing you, B. Okay.
Pedro, me encanta lo que... repítele a Bob, sí, lo que dijo Pedro, dale.
Repito, repite.
Repite tú.
Bob, estoy diciendo que para mí este evento que estamos teniendo es el mejor ejemplo aplicado de lo que nos estás contando. Porque eso eres tú, Maribel y el instituto, escuchando el momento, preguntando en qué andan los practicantes del CCG, cómo les está yendo, y entendiendo que en este momento lo que necesitamos, esto es lo que nos genera valor, retomar esto, escucharlo. Entonces, muchísimas gracias, porque esto son ustedes aplicando lo que predican. Muchas gracias, para mí muy valioso.
Súper, Pedro, me encanta. Y aquí un pedido, y es, por favor, díganos. ¿Por qué no hablamos de esto? ¿Por qué no hablamos de aquello? ¿Por qué no hablamos de lo otro? Y es para nosotros súper importante para traer todos los miércoles un tema nuevo. Así que si tienes temas, si ustedes tienen temas, simplemente escríbanos, sugiéranos y díganos, esto es lo que queremos. Para nosotros el tema de la crisis es súper evidente porque lo estamos viendo, lo estamos viviendo, todo el mundo está hablándolo. Y sin embargo, de verdad, nuestros alumnos, las personas de la comunidad que estamos, nosotros, o sea, todos tenemos trabajo, todos estamos trabajando, todos tenemos posibilidades, estamos generando posibilidades. Entonces, para nosotros era poder decir, así lo hacemos, es con los 5 puntos o los 6 puntos que les estaba diciendo, es busca las posibilidades, balancee lo que conserva y empiece a adaptar, ¿no? Entonces, me encanta que lo mire, que lo veas, que te hayas dado cuenta, me hace feliz. Y si tienen temas, por favor, escríbanos a través escríbanos por mail o escríbanos en Instagram, díganos, o en Facebook, díganos qué necesitan y nosotros con mucho gusto lo iremos trayendo. Bueno, así que dentro de 8 días los esperamos también para nuestros miércoles de liderazgo. Queremos mostrarles, seguir con este tema y mostrarles cómo algunos de nuestros alumnos están prosperando, qué es lo que están haciendo, qué fue lo que aprendieron o qué es lo que estamos aprendiendo, qué es lo que practicamos en la comunidad del CCG, como dice Pedro, que nos permite estar abiertos a nuevas situaciones. Entonces, próximo miércoles, para que no solamente lo oigan de la boca de Bob o de la boca mía, sino de las personas que realmente lo están aprendiendo, lo están haciendo. Entonces, muchas gracias por estar acá. Los invitamos dentro de 8 días. Bob, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros, por acompañarnos. Beita, gracias por ser puente también, por estar aquí con nosotros. Y a todos ustedes los esperamos dentro de 8 días.